We'll be out on the river for about 45 minutes this morning, and in that space of time you can expect to take in about 4 miles of the Ouse. We'll head north to begin with, as far north as Clifford, the city's northern outskirts, where we'll spin around for the first time. We'll then come downstream through the city centre, which is the portion of the cruise where you generally expect to take in most of York's historic and medieval sites. And continuing south from there, we'll leave the city walls behind us again and head as far south as Fulford, the top end of Fulford anyway, just on the new walk in front of the Millennium Bridge, where we'll spin around for the second time and come back upstream to the landings. Now I say landings plural because we actually have 2 landings on our cruise today. All of our trips today, in fact, are advertised as double pickups and double drop-offs. What this means is we've got 2 moorings in the city that we collect passengers from at the beginning of each sailing. We then drop passengers off to those same 2 landings in the same order at the end of each sailing. The first of the 2 is the one that you boarded at on the city centre moorings located in Kings Staith, which is the next landing stage is just on the other side of this grey cast iron road bridge coming into view in front of us here now. These are our Lendal Bridge Landings, named after the bridge itself, of course, and they are located at the northern end of the medieval city. Now, fingers crossed, it should just be a very brief call up here at Lendal, and we're advertised as the 10:40 departure from Lendal Bridge. We have a ticket seller for sure at Lendal selling tickets in advance and herding people into an orderly line. So yes, everybody waiting there should already have a ticket, and it should just be a case of ushering them on board and then getting underway again. I will need to go through a short safety announcement for the benefit of all passengers on leaving Lendal Bridge. It's a formality really, as we don't expect anything to go wrong whilst out on the river, but just to comply with relevant legislation and to be on the overly cautious side, we're obliged to let you know the location of life-saving emergency equipment around the vessel, just in case it's needed. Once we've got the housekeeping announcements opened up, I'll give you some introductions to the boat's crew, and there'll be a bit of sightseeing commentary and so on for the rest of the trip. In the short space of time between here and Lendal Bridge, of course, I'm going to put the microphone down now, leave you in peace. You'll be hearing plenty from me over the course of the next 3 quarters of an hour, so just for now, I'd like to give your ears a bit of a rest. For good ask that you remain seated just immediately as we come into dock though, please, as we are in a metal boat and we're coming alongside a concrete landing. There's likely to be a slight movement or 2, so it's important that you're well away from any stairwells, railings or open exits for now. Thank you. Whilst paying attention to the commentaries, as an option, we do ask if you can show your attention for this information, as it will only take a couple of minutes. It's really just to let you know that we carry more than enough life-saving flotation aids for passengers and crew. We carry enough for 193 on board, which is definitely an 38 of us on board today. This equipment can mostly be found on the top deck in the form of two open reversible inflatable life rafts and white canisters at the front and back. There's a stack of rigid orange life rafts also at the back, and there's rigid orange life rings slung from the upper and back deck rails. All of this equipment is designed and positioned to be launched or utilised manually. Provides apparatus and life buoys will also float free if needed. We carry firefighting equipment too, in the form of extinguishers at front and back of the main saloon area. There's one kept in the wheelhouse with me, and a fire hose and pump located on the aft deck. In the highly unlikely event of any emergency during our cruise today, please remain calm. Follow any instructions that are given to you by this boat's crew. They will guide you towards your nearest and safest exit. That's just in case of evacuation, really. The large central windows in the enclosed saloon area downstairs are marked for use as emergency exits and will slide open to provide additional exits in case of emergency. For any minor cuts or scrapes, we also keep a first aid box behind the boat's bar, which is available there at all times. Well, that's all on safety, so thanks very much for your attention. Thanks for bearing with me through that. If you've got any questions concerning river safety, this trip, or anything at all to do with life in general really, please don't hesitate to contact any member of this boat's crew. We will be more than happy to help you and clarify any points you'd like explaining. I can't guarantee, of course, that we know all the answers to life's deepest mysteries, but we'll certainly try our best to help you. Speaking of your crew today then, we'll do some quick introductions now, just to start off with. To turn around for this bit briefly because I usually begin with myself here. My name's Larry. Hello. I like to do this bit because it proves I'm really speaking. And that I do sound a little bit like a recording when I'm rattling through the safety stuff at the start there, but no, believe it or not, I actually provide live commentary on all my trips, which I think is better than the printed or pre-recorded alternative, though I will of course let you be the judge of that at the end. I'll be your skipper today, pointing out a bit of what we can see from the boat, the sights, sounds and stories of this stretch of the River Ouse here in York. I'll also be dodging the bridges, hopefully, and throwing a few fairly terrible jokes into the commentary as well. I apologise in advance for the jokes, I'm just turning into my dad here, one bad joke at a time, or so I've been told anyway. Joining us downstairs today, tying and untying the ropes, attending to seamanship and safety, selling the tickets, serving the drinks. To be honest, doing all the really hard and important work on board, you're in the very capable hands of Jordan and Chloe today. Jordan and Chloe are your crew members. Please go and see them if you need anything whatsoever during the course of this trip. The most likely thing you'll want to see the crew downstairs for, of course, well, some service at the bar. I'll let you know, as it's important information. The bar's open now and will remain open for the duration of the cruise until about 10 minutes before our first drop-off at Kings Staith at the end, so the bar will close on this trip at 11:05. Up until then, you can expect to get beers and wines and spirits down there, also hot drinks, soft drinks and snacks, of course. You're welcome to bring any drinks or snacks you like up to the top deck. Licensing covers the whole boat. One thing you can't do anywhere on board River Palace, though, I'm afraid to say, is smoke. It's a strictly no-smoking boat, which includes the open decks and the use of electronic cigarettes and vaping here, unfortunately. So, whether you smoke or vape, please the simple rules are the easy ones. But then I did used to be a primary school teacher in a former life, I bet you can't tell. Is it that obvious? Yeah. So with all the housekeeping stuff over and done with now, I can start up a bit of commentary for you here. I'd like to begin mostly as a preamble to any historic and sightseeing commentary which you generally look to get on the downstream portion of this cruise by telling you just a little about the river. I find it helps to set the scene a bit at the start of the sailing and to give you some idea of where we are, geographically speaking. We are, of course, cruising on the Ouse today, which is spelled O-U-S-E. The Ouse is about 52 miles long and it flows roughly north to south through the centre of historic Yorkshire. This river has its origins in the Yorkshire Dales. That's a national park north of here. We're cruising upstream at the moment, so that's taking us roughly northward towards the source of the river. The source can be found with the rising of three smaller rivers up in the Dales. That's the Ure, the Swale and the Nid. The River Ure is the Ouse's main tributary, and that rises on the slopes of Whernside, which is Yorkshire's highest peak. It flows down through a distance of 74 miles, being joined by the Swale near a town called Lendal Bridge. It's then later on joined by a much smaller, almost inconsequential, really, little stream that's known as the Ousegill Bag. That's at a village called Great Ouseburn, located about 13 miles ahead of us here now by river. Now, generally speaking, when two rivers meet, you do expect the larger one of the two to keep its name. But for some reason, lost to the mists of history, the River Ure gives up its identity there. It takes on the name of the smaller beck and becomes known as the Ouse from that point onwards. The River Nid flows in at Nuneaton, which is about 7 miles ahead of us, and in total this river drains an area of over 3,000 square miles of land, which is some very peaty countryside up in the Dales too, by the way. That's also the reason for this brown colour of the river water you can see when you look over the sides of the boat. It isn't in fact badly polluted, it's stained brown by the presence of tannins, naturally occurring peat sediments containing these are washed down from the hillsides and stains the water this colour. Despite its murky looks, the Ouse is actually quite clean enough to support a wide variety of aquatic and bird life. So clean, in fact, that it's said, ladies and gents, if you were to dip a pint glass into the waters of the Ouse and leave the resulting liquid standing on the side, after 15 to 20 minutes the sediments in the water would begin to clear and separate, eventually, after some time, leaving the river water in the glass crystal clear. You could, it's also been said, drink the crystal clear river water in that glass if you wanted to, ladies and gents. Boys and girls. But of course you would probably die if you tried that. I suppose you could try and drink it. I did say the joke's a bit odd. Oh yes, I should also probably mention that waving a small children at the riverbanks is mandatory. I don't know why it's a rule. It's at this point in the trip here, though, if you can believe it, we're already approaching the northern outskirts of York in Clifton. After Clifton, we're rapidly leaving the city behind us and heading out into open countryside in the Vale, which is the flat area of farmland that surrounds York. To keep within the remit of a city cruise, then, we'll need to think about turning around fairly soon. What would happen if we didn't turn around up here? Well, if we had all the time in the world in this direction, we could continue onward for a further 28 miles this way, before reaching the medieval cathedral city of Ripon. Ripon is about the furthest this river system can be navigated northwards. After Ripon, the River Ure, which it sits over narrows and shallows to such a point that it can't admit anything much larger than a rowing boat, a canoe, or a kayak, and certainly nothing with an engine could go up straight from there. If you've ever done York to Ripon in a car, well, you'll know that journey takes you 45 minutes to an hour, just depending on the level of traffic, really. If you'd like to make the same journey by boat on the river, well, it's going to take you a little bit longer than that, a minimum of 9 hours from here, which does make it just a fraction ambitious for a 45-minute sightseeing trip. Anyway, with this in mind then, we're going to turn around on this bend just in front of us here now. We'll take you downstream then, and we'll see what sights we can see down there. I'm just going to get a quick look around the next bend though, make sure there's no nasty surprises coming downstream the opposite way. This downstream traffic does have right of way on this river. And as long as it's all clear, we'll be spinning around to port, which is to the left, if you're not politically inclined. Alright, well, it's looking like we're all clear now then, folks. So, fingers crossed, please. I've never turned the boat here before. Never driven a boat before either. I mean, how hard could it be? I do hope we don't have any nervous boaters on the top there today. Any nervous boaters? No? Good. I should have asked that question before I started telling the jokes. It's better late than never, as they say. You might be wondering why this sound signals though, why do I keep sounding the horn periodically, particularly the people at the front and the top of the tent. Not sure why. I think it's mostly to do with signalling to other river users. It'd be quite impractical to have indicator lights on something this size, so waterborne vessels instead use the horn or light signals to signal their intentions to other river users. One short blast means that we're turning right, which is starboard. Two short blasts means we're turning left, which is port. And if you hear three short blasts at any point, well, that would mean that we're using a stern gear, so either reversing or stopping. The one sound signal on the river that you really do want to listen out for, though, is the one incredibly long, prolonged blast on the horn, which doesn't stop. If you hear that one at any point, it means I've fallen asleep with my head on the console. Well, like, you're laughing, it's never happened yet, and I'm told there's a first time for everything. If I do fall asleep with my head on the button, come and wake me up, otherwise we could end up in Ripon, or somewhere even worse. That is a joke, by the way, if we've got anybody on board from Ripon today. Please don't write in, I do like my job. You can imagine the TripAdvisor reviews. Completing the first turn now, we'll be heading downstream. This is the portion of the trip where you generally expect to take in most of York's historic and medieval sites that can be viewed from the river. And we'll begin this portion of the commentary pretty much right away, with a few views ahead and on the left here of York Minster, the city's cathedral. Appearing at about 10 to 11 o'clock to the vessel on this next reach through some of the gaps in the trees and above the buildings, this is at about 10 to 11 o'clock to the boat, a few views of the distinctive crown of pinnacles on each of the two western bell towers. The central tower sits behind these at a height of 235 feet, the tallest thing in York, and in a few moments on the far left-hand side of the building you can make out the pointed lead-lined roof of the chapter house, which juts out from the top end of the north transept, giving you some impression of the truly massive floor plan of the Minster. Just here between these two trees and above these concrete steps is possibly your best view of the Minster from the river. Blink and you'll miss it though. The view lasts about 10 seconds. There it goes. Yeah, as you've already no doubt worked out, your best views of the cathedral and the city could probably be gained by walking up Museum Street at the front of it, but we've not yet worked out how to make River Palace crawl. Unfortunately, we are working on it. This being said, I like to bring the cruises up to this point, mostly to afford you some views of the bell towers, and to give us an opportunity then to talk a little bit about the history of the Minster. It's a good point to start the historic commentary, and no trip to the city would be complete without learning at least a bit about the history of its most iconic building. York Minster, as we know it today then, was commissioned in 1220 AD by the Archbishop of York at that time, Walter de Grey. He was a very prolific figure in the medieval life of the city, responsible for numerous ecclesiastical buildings in and around town. All his other achievements notwithstanding, York Minster was, arguably, Walter de Grey's masterpiece. A shame, therefore, that he never lived to see his masterpiece completed, really. With the ebb and flow of funding, materials and manpower to the project, the Minster wasn't declared finished and consecrated until 1472. That's 252 years in construction, which does sound a bit like the same workman who built the extension. That's not a joke, by the way. That's not part of the commentary, it's quite sobering. But yes, you're not on here to listen to my life story, so anyway, moving swiftly on. The result of that building project then is the second largest Gothic style cathedral in Northern Europe. It's the largest Gothic cathedral in the UK, and it houses the bell with the deepest tone in the world. That's Great Peter in the note of E flat, the bell that chimes the hour. It's the largest thing in the city, of course, and as I've already mentioned, the tallest thing in town. The central tower of the Minster's status as the city's tallest building is actually guaranteed in law. There's an obscure and somewhat bizarre medieval bylaw here, which has never been repealed. It clearly states that nothing can be built in the city closer to God than the central tower of the Minster. Seems fairly reasonable to me. Anyways, for this reason, you won't see any skyscrapers built here anytime soon. You'll have to go to New York if you want to see those. Sadly, it's this point though, the little views of the Minster we do get from the river really are passing behind us now, for the most part. The sights will come fairly thick and fast from this one, though, as we continue to cruise downstream through the older medieval portions of York city centre. These sights will be equally visible now too from both upper and lower decks of the boat, so it doesn't matter too much where you sit, though obviously your best views still are from the top deck. Rounding this next bend, the bridge is coming into view in front of us. It's one that we've already been underneath once in the upstream direction, of course, but I was a bit busy doing safety announcements and things last time around, so I'll tell you a bit about it now. It's the first of 4 bridges we'll be sailing underneath in the downstream direction, so that's all the city centre's bridge crossings. This one here is Scarborough Railway Bridge, York's only active rail and foot crossing, and I dare say I don't need to tell you the destination of the railway line this one carries. It is, of course, the sunny seaside resort town of Skeldergate, about 40 miles to the northeast of us here on the coast. Opened in 1845, which made it the second bridge to be built over the river here in York. The oldest bridge in town is, of course, the Ouse Bridge, the stone bridge in the centre of the city, which is 2 bridges further down nowadays. We'll be going underneath the Ouse Bridge later on. If we've got any railway enthusiasts on board today, you may be interested to learn that Scarborough Bridge was designed by Robert Stephenson, kind of railway royalty if you like. He was the son of George Stephenson, of Stephenson's rocket fame. Looking downstream through this bridge into the distance ahead of us here now, another view is opening up from this perspective. Quite possibly the second most popularly photographed view in York after the front of the Minster. It's also definitely one of the city's most historic views. We're looking at the northern aspect on town here, with Lendal Bridge in the foreground, the Guildhall and St Martin the Grand, Coney Street behind it. Of course, long before we get back to Lendal Bridge, look over to the left-hand bank here now. You can see a small, round, wooden stone tower. People often mistake this tower for part of the medieval city walls. It's not. It's a separate fortification which at one time guarded a powerful Benedictine monastery that lay in the grounds behind it. That abbey was known as St Mary's Abbey. It was founded in the year 1088 AD and at one time was the wealthiest abbey in the north of England. Like a lot of institutions of its type, St Mary's didn't survive the reign of King Henry VIII, destroyed during the conflict between the monarch and the Pope that led to the founding of the Church of England in 1541. That's the River King there, with the next generation of City Cruises skippers, training under the watchful eye. Head trainer, give them a wave, I'm sure they could use the encouragement. Behind the fencing on the left-hand side here, what used to be the grounds of St Mary's Abbey, nowadays is 10 acres of formal parkland known as Museum Gardens. The Museum Gardens were laid down in 1835, mostly as a space to house the buildings of the Yorkshire Museum, which was built in 1823. The Yorkshire Museum is still there. It comes highly recommended. It contains a fantastic array of exhibits. You'll see it briefly here on the left. If you looked at the top of the hill as we pass by, you just get a brief glimpse of it there. In front of us here now is Lendal Bridge, of course, the older of York's 2 cast iron Victorian road crossings, completed and opened in 1863. It's arguably the most iconic bridge on the Ouse and certainly the only road bridge to cross the river in a single span. Designed by the eminent architect and engineer Sir Thomas Page, the same man responsible for Westminster Bridge over the Thames in London. The 2 towers to the left and right of the bridge here are known as Lendal Tower and Barker Tower respectively. They do form part of the medieval walls which you can see stretching away to the right there. Crossing this imaginary line between the 2 towers, we're now entering the medieval city at the northern end of town. Well, speaking of medieval York, that's York's Guildhall ahead of us on the left, this cream and gold limestone building which is topped by crenellations. The oldest parts of the Guildhall date back to the 15th century. It used to control much of the medieval trade that passed through York. It's been fairly extensively rebuilt and modified over the centuries since then, of course, including most recently, right now. It's undergoing a £25 million restoration and rebuild at the moment, converting the building for use as boutique hotel accommodation, fine dining and retail units. Ahead of us and still to the left, another conversion, the Yorkshire Herald building, which was the print works of the Herald in York until about 35 years ago. It's Grade 2 listed, so most of its external Art Deco features remain intact, but the inside now is taken up by a 3-screen cinema, and as you can see here, various riverside bars and cafes. In case you're wondering, the answer is yes. We do see interesting riverside wildlife up on the balconies from time to time, especially on a Friday and a Saturday night. And on a Sunday on a bank holiday weekend, as we just recently discovered. The less said about that, the better, probably. In front of us here, slap bang in the centre of the city, is the Ouse Bridge, which I mentioned in passing earlier on. The current version of the Ouse Bridge is a 3-arch stone span that dates from 1821. It was designed by Peter Atkinson the Younger, a famous local architect. The reason I call it the current version of the Ouse Bridge, of course, well, it's not the first version of this bridge to stand here by any stretch of the imagination. The first Ouse Bridge was built by the Vikings, a wooden crossing at the heart of Jorvik, the Danish capital, which used to stand on this site. Jorvik, of course, is where York originally derives its name from. There's been a succession of 4 Ouse bridges built here since that time. For nearly a millennium, it was the only place you could cross the river on foot, anywhere along its length, which is why the bridge takes its name from the river, of course, the Ouse Bridge. Passing downstream through this bridge, we're now entering York's Port District, which at one time was the busiest area of the city. The quayside ahead of us on the left, which we set off from at the beginning of this cruise, is known as Kings Staith. And the quayside on the right-hand bank, opposite, you can see clearly written on the wall over there, it's known as Queen's Staith. Staith is an Old Norse word. It's another Old Viking word, which means mooring or landing place. We do owe an awful lot to the Vikings here in York. Many of the older street names and areas within the city take their names directly from Norse roots. In front of us here, marking the entrance to the Port District and incidentally the south end of medieval York now, is Skeldergate Bridge. Skeldergate Bridge is a 5-arch span that dates from 1881. As you can see here, only 3 of these arches cover the river itself. If you haven't already guessed from its appearance and from the date of construction, this is the younger of the city's 2 cast-iron Victorian road bridges. Indeed, this bridge and Lendal Bridge are distantly related. They are both designed by the same man, Sir Thomas Page. Skeldergate does have a feature that Lendal Bridge doesn't share though. If you take a look over to the left-hand arch on the river as we approach, so that's the small arch over there on the left, halfway along the archway you can see a split in the metalwork. It's not a structural fault. At one time that left-hand arch of the bridge was designed and engineered to open, to allow taller-masted sailing boats and cargo barges to enter and exit the port without lowering their masts or rigging. The last time that this bridge opened to accommodate river traffic, of course, was 50 years ago, more now, in 1971. The winding mechanisms have long since been removed and Skeldergate Bridge has been sealed shut now. Passing downstream through it, we're exiting the Port District and the medieval city at the south end. It's quite a compact area really, the medieval town. Looking ahead of us on the left here, you can see along the staircase the coach park coming into view. It's known as St George's Field, and why are you drawing my attention to a car park? Now, it isn't much to look at these days. It's a site of some historical significance for the region because it's where Europe was founded, almost 2,000 years ago now in fact, in 71 AD by the Romans. The Roman Empire were the first to settle here. They came here with the 9th Legion as part of the conquest of Britannia under Augustus Caesar, constructing a legionary fortress here on the left, the confluence of this region's 2 rivers, which are now called the Ouse and the Foss, where we have no record of what the Romans called the rivers. We do know what they called the fortress though. That was named River Ouse, which means place where the nutrient goes in Latin. River was the road. Of course, there's no new trees to look at over there on the left now. No regional fortress either for that matter. It's a these days. show you though is that it doesn't really matter where you go in Europe. You can expect to find upwards of 2,000 years worth of history right beneath your feet. Well, taking a quick look at the time here now, I can see that we're coming into the home stretch. This does mean, as I mentioned earlier, it's now time of the bar, folks. Time for the bar. No more drinks, thank you. Got about 10 minutes left to finish up any drinks that you've got left before we get back into the landings. And speaking of getting back into the landings, well, perhaps I need to think about turning around for the second time before too much longer to stand some chance of doing so, something like on time. What would happen if we didn't turn around at the south end of York? Well, if we had all the time in the world in this direction, we could continue cruising south and then eastward along the Humber, following the flow of this river, but eventually reach the North Sea from here. All rivers end at the sea, this one's no exception, though it's probably a lot further than you might think between York and the sea by river, a total of 85 miles, which makes this the most inland seaport in the country. 5 miles ahead of us we pass through Naban Lock and Weir, the last set of locks before this river becomes tidal. The tidal Ouse flows south from there, and it takes in the outflow from 5 smaller rivers on its journey down. In order, these rivers are the Wharfe, the Aire, the Don, the Derwent, and the Trent, of course. And where the rivers Trent and Ouse merge together, at Trent Falls the combined flow becomes so massive that it turns eastwards and opens out into a tidal estuary known as the Humber Estuary. That flows out past the inland ports of Goole, Hull and Grimsby, before eventually reaching the North Sea at Spurn Head. The total distance between York and Spurn can be covered in about 30 hours if the tide's being kind to you. I do think Chloe and Jordan want to go home at some point today though, so just to avoid having a mutiny on the hands really, I'm going to make the second turn right now. Making the second turn here, you'll see the reason I like to just nose around that last bend there. It gives you a nice open view down this tree-lined avenue that you walk to Millennium Bridge in the far distance. With its rather characteristic and elegant bowstring suspension girder design, this is the most recent addition to bridges on the Ouse. Installed as part of the Millennium project for the city, as you'd also expect, given the name, it was of course opened bang on time too, the 10th of April. 2001. They did try. Looking over to the left-hand side of the moat, at the head of the new wall, you can see another bridge up there, a much smaller blue bridge, which sits across the mouth of York's second smaller river. That's the entrance to the River Foss. If you know much about the geography of York, or you were listening really carefully earlier when I was talking about the Roman history, you probably already realise that the Ouse isn't the only river in town. The Foss rises on the Hamiltonian hills to the northeast of the city near a village called Yearsley, and meanders down through a distance of about 20 miles before reaching its terminus at the Ouse basin along here. You're not imagining things, the Ouse does get wider after the mouth of the Foss. It also becomes deeper from this point downwards, as the total volume of river water flowing south out of the city from here increases by quite a lot. York's location in between two rivers like this, of course, well, that's no accident either. The Romans chose this location first because of its defensive qualities. Flowing water on two sides and the dense forest of Guildhouse to the north made it very easy to defend, and the Saxons, Vikings and Normans who followed in waves invading and settling here after the Romans, they all agreed with the Romans that this place was easily defended, and it's one of several reasons it's proved such a popular settlement location historically. If you're curious about the name of the small blue bridge, it's called the Blue Bridge. I'm sure the council had to think long and hard about that name. I was about to pass by the Blue Bridge here and heading back up towards Skeldergate Bridge. We're coming into the closing moments of the cruise today, so in a few minutes' time we'll be coming into land at the first of two drop-off points for you on this trip. A quick word on disembarking then. It really doesn't matter to us where you boarded. Your ticket's good to either drop-off, so feel free to leave us at whichever one suits you best, either now at Kings Staith in the city centre or 10 minutes after Kings Staith at Lendal Bridge, the northern outskirts of town.
So which one?
Bearing in mind, of course, that if you did originally board at Lendal Bridge and you decide to leave us down here at Kings Staith, the earlier drop-off, you'll only be getting about 35 minutes worth of boat ride for your money instead of the advertised 45. This is because we measure the 45 minutes like a round trip from the landing stage you embark at, if that makes sense. Speaking purely as a Yorkshireman, I think those 10 minutes probably wouldn't matter to me. That's the reason I like to mention that. But don't let my penny pinching attitudes deter you. Feel free to leave us at whichever stop does suit you best. All that remains for me to do on this cruise now, whilst I've got the time and the opportunity here, is to say a really big and sincere thank you to all of you. That's a big thank you from me, Laurie, your skipper, and my crew members, Chloe and Jordan downstairs, from Peter managing the quayside and Lendal Bridge today. Indeed, from everybody here at City Cruises, thank you very much for choosing to sail with us today aboard River Palace. I do hope you've had a pleasant time with us here on the river. You've enjoyed your cruise on the Ouse and found it relaxing. On a personal note, I hope you've enjoyed the commentary too. Thought it was entertaining and informing. Didn't think my jokes were too awful. And preferred it to a printed or pre-recorded announcement in any case. As mentioned at the start, we're not obliged to provide live commentary on these cruises, but I personally think it's a shame not to give you a live account of York as we go, so I do very much hope you did enjoy that. If you are feeling like you've enjoyed the trip and enjoyed the commentary today, well, good feedback's always appreciated, of course. If you feel inspired enough, you could leave us a review online at one of the tourist websites such as TripAdvisor at the end of the day. If that review is going to be positive, I'll say thank you very much in advance, and I'll remind you my name's Laurie. On the other hand, of course, though, if you didn't enjoy your trip with us today and you're planning on leaving us a negative review online, well then in that case, I'll remind you again, the name's Dave. Alright, you're laughing, but it's sorry if you liked it, Dave. If you didn't, okay, go on, I've sorted that out. Probably a little bit unfair on reflection, actually, as Dave's one of our other skippers. Or at least he used to be. He's no longer with us, sadly. Finished last year after 10 years at the company. Nothing to do with the bad reviews, I'm sure you. Although for some reason Dave is still getting bad reviews to this very day. I really have no idea why. It seems to be one of York's mysteries. In all seriousness, of course, I don't like to compare myself to the other skippers. This being said, should you wish to show your appreciation in another form at the end of the trip, I'm told that the best skippers and crew on these boats make the best tips at the end of each day. This being the case, I must be a brilliant skipper because I'm always getting hot tips from passengers at the end of every trip. Usually tips like, try driving in a straight line, and other tips like, have you thought about being quiet occasionally? So I do know that I talk a lot on these trips, by the way. It's not really my fault though, it's yours. There's a lot of history to tell you here. Too much really to squeeze it all into just 45 minutes. But I do like to try and have a good value for money on these cruises. Anyway, well, certainly these are the kind of tips that we're looking for on the river, of course, but we do take what we get in this life, really, don't we? Well, I certainly do, in any case. So with that last opportunity for a terrible joke out of the way, never can resist the urge but to make one more. We're just waiting for the River Duchess to pull away from Kings Staith number 1 and to set sail on the 11:15 departure. Then we'll be coming into dock for the first drop-off. I'd like to ask at this point that regardless of whether you're planning on leaving us at Kings Staith or staying on until Lendal Bridge, you all return to your seats for the moment, please. Please take your seats now and stay seated, well away from any stairs, rails or open exits. That's just until we've had a chance to get the ropes in place. Vessels come to a complete stop, resting against the landing stage, and you've been invited to step ashore by a crew member. You're about to put a steel boat against a concrete raft. There's always a slight bump or two as you come to rest alongside the quayside. This won't be anything too extreme, of course. I've done it a few times before at this point, but just to be on the safe side, please do keep your seats and wait to be called to shore. We'll get you off the boat just as quickly as we can. Thank you.